the news this week, computer surveys. Why are they inaccurate? Prestel finally goes into profit. And the winner of the BP Build a Robot competition. MicroLive has discovered major inconsistencies in the way surveys are conducted for the computer industry. Apricot complained this week that a survey compiled by Wharton Information Systems gave a totally inaccurate figure of 3% for their share of the personal computer market. Whartons weren't using a representative sample of Apricot dealers because they didn't possess a list of them. Apricot is now advertising Romtech's survey, which shows it with 19.2%. But this underestimates IBM's share because it doesn't include direct sales from the manufacturer to the customer. Whartons today released new figures using a revised sample of dealers, which gave Apricot only 8% of the market. Clearly, the controversy will continue. 5 years after it went nationwide, British Telecom's public view data service Prestel is finally trading at a profit. David Musson, Prestel's head of marketing, revealed that there are now 62,000 terminals attached to the Prestel network, of which just under half are in the home. The most profitable parts of Prestel are its business services, especially those reserved for travel agents. The most popular pages are the micro-magazines like Micronet. And finally, the biannual BP Build a Robot contest took place this week. Fred reports.
This year's competition was held at the Arborfield Army Camp. Most of the machines cost under £100 to build. The 20 finalists had to produce a mechanical butler capable of collecting 2 drinks from a drinks dispenser and delivering them to 2 people. Most competitors used light beams to guide their machines, with varying degrees of success. The winning entry lacked the finesse of the traditional English butler. It didn't use a computer, but tracked the light beam with homemade digital logic. A case of shaken, not stirred? His Royal Highness the Duke of Kent presented the £1,000 prize to winners Campion School, Leamington Spa, and their robot Jeeves. They plan to use the money to build more robots. Keeping information about people is vital to businesses that trade in information, like banking and insurance. Nowadays, of course, that information is nearly always held on computer databases. Personal details can be sifted through, sorted and transmitted at the push of a return key.
But the increasing ease with which personal details can be obtained has worried groups concerned with civil liberties. What if the information is wrong and as a result you're refused maybe a bank loan or an insurance policy, possibly even a job? Well, in July 1984, the Data Protection Act was passed. Its intention is to give all of us the right to look at any information about us which is held on computer for business purposes. Companies holding data on individuals are now obliged to fill in one of these. It's a data registration form saying what they hold and why. The doors of the Data Protection Office open in 10 days' time, and companies will have until May the 11th next year to return the forms, together with the £22 registration fee, or they could face unlimited fines.
Most companies in Europe have already passed data protection legislation. Norway, for example, even has data protection police to protect the right of the individual. But the British government is less worried about individual liberties than about the blow that not passing a Data Protection Act would deal to our trade. There was a danger that unless we had an act of our own, the rest of Europe would have simply refused to send their data here to be processed.
But for many businessmen, the legislation itself is a bit of a puzzle. Stephen Barry runs a wine business in London and has to keep details of payments made by individual customers. But he believes that if those customers are registered as businesses, then they no longer count as individuals under the Act. Or do they? Then there's the problem of the 150 or so bulletin board operators in Britain. A spokesman for them told MicroLive that he was extremely worried by the Act because as they held computerised details on subscribers, it seems that they are liable to register. And of course, if some of the younger operators didn't bother or maybe didn't know they had to comply, I suppose it could cost them their savings.
And Kodak have come up with something that seems to fall in between 2 categories. It's their computer-accessed microfilm machine. Kodak system uses a computer-aided search to get to personal details which are actually stored on microfilm. Well, the Act says that information stored on photographs, like card indexes, falls outside its scope. Does that mean that users of the Kodak system have to register? It isn't clear.
Well, the man who has the unenviable task of trying to sort it all out is the data protection registrar, Eric Howe. Hello, Mr. Howe. It seems almost as though there are as many exceptions as there are rules, but at least we have you here to clarify some of the queries we just heard about. Can we start with the bulletin board operators? Now, how are they going to be affected by this Act?
Well, if they keep information on their subscribers, many of their subscribers will be individuals, so therefore they would be covered by the Act. It could be that there's an exemption that bulletin board operators could apply, for example, keeping information simply for accounting purposes. There are restrictions around that exemption, but they may well be able to meet those restrictions. Or alternatively, they could possibly form a club, and then, as long as they ask the members of the club if they object to that information being held, and they don't, they could get an exemption that way.
Right. Would the same sort of rulings apply for other home users who are maybe using their computers to keep records of the local parent-teachers association, the residents association, this sort of thing?
Well, if they're keeping information simply for domestic pleasure, recreational purposes, keep Auntie's birthday, for example, on the computers, that would be exempt, so many of your viewers can relax.
That is totally personal, though, isn't it?
That is correct.
Yeah.
So if they're using information for another organisation, then the organisation itself would have to consider, was it exempt or not? If, again, it was an unincorporated members club, it could possibly claim an exemption. But if it is a registered company, for example, and, for example, churches may well be in that position of having to register, then the person who, say, kept the accounts for the parochial church council would have to be covered by the register entry of the church. So he would have to make arrangements with the church about that.
And could the operators of those systems become exempt if they got permission from all the subjects of the data that they were keeping?
Well, no, it depends on the organisations themselves. As we say, if they're an unincorporated members club, maybe a tennis club is not a registered company, for example, if they speak to their members or write to their members and say, we hold this information on a computer, do you object? And they don't object, then they would be exempt from the Act.
Right.
If someone had objected, they'd have to take his information off, of course.
Down to business for a moment. Our Mr. Barry, the wine merchant, was he right in assuming that his customers aren't considered to be individuals under the Act because they're all registered businesses, as far as he knows?
Well, if they are registered businesses, then the Act doesn't cover information about corporations, about businesses as such. But I suspect many of his customers are individuals who just run restaurants of their own, and they're not registered companies. So that would be personal information. He may again be able to claim the accounts exemption, but it may be less likely in his case than it would be in the previous one we referred to. Certainly that exemption is hedged about with many provisions which all but the very small businesses probably wouldn't want to keep.
So people like Mr. Barry and in Mr. Barry's position, would they be better to be safe than sorry and register?
I think so. Certainly at the very least he should examine the Act carefully and see if he needs to register.
Is it easy enough to deregister?
Oh yes, it's easy enough to take your register entry off. Would be a simple form.
Do you get your money back?
Oh no, I'm afraid not. No, we've done all the work for the money, so we keep the money.
Right. Going on to the combined systems, the actual equipment that is covered by the Act, how about the example that we gave of the Kodak equipment, where you've got a combination, you've got a computer being used, though it's not actually storing information?
Well, the computer we saw here was linked to a microfilm machine and automatically retrieving information from it. Kodak have been discussing this with me. We've not reached a definitive conclusion yet.
When you do, let me know, and I shall tell them.
Fine,
It's obviously still a very grey area. Anyone with any queries, they can contact you, I gather.
Oh, yes, indeed. If they'd like to contact my office at Wilmslow, we distribute books like this, for example, or contact their trade association or professional body, they should be able to help.
Right, thank you very much. And full address for that, of course, will be on our programme notes. Well, I don't know whether it'll be confused data users or curious data subjects. Either way, I think your office and staff are going to be inundated, but thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, very welcome.
Thank you.